Good.
All right, absolutely. All right.
Is Jay ready?
We're ready, guys. We'll kick it off. Welcome back to New Hampshire Next, a summit for young changemakers. If you're joining us for the first time today, my name is Will Stewart, and I'm the Executive Director of Stay, Work, Play New Hampshire. And we're a statewide nonprofit whose aim in our mission is to attract and retain more young people here in the Granite State. And our primary goal for New Hampshire Next is to inspire and educate young New Hampshire changemakers to work to create positive change in their communities and the state as a whole. And on that count, today's session will not disappoint. First up, we're going to hear from a young New Hampshireite who has successfully organized an effort to get a groundbreaking bill passed by the New Hampshire Legislature and signed by the governor last year. Afterwards, we're going to use the real-life lessons that we learned from her to discuss how we might all create change in our own communities. Before we jump into that, however, I just want to take a moment to recognize and thank Dartmouth-Hitchcock Health for their sponsorship of New Hampshire Next. They're a leading employer across the state and also a great partner for Stay, Work, Play and so many other organizations here in New Hampshire. And of course, these days they're on the front lines of the battle against COVID-19. So for all of these reasons, we are very, very grateful to Dartmouth-Hitchcock Health and thank them for everything that they do. Also like to take an opportunity to thank all of you for joining us here today and for your desire to help make New Hampshire a better place. So with that, let's get started. Guiding us today is Sarah Reitzman. Sarah is the Executive Director of the Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast and Housing Planner for the Regional Economic Development Center. She was named to Union Leaders 40 Under 40 earlier this year, New Hampshire Magazine's It List in 2019, and Seacoast Media Group and Catapult Seacoast 10 to Watch in 2019. In 2018, Sarah was honored as Civic Leader of the Year at the Rising Stars Awards by Stay, Work, Play and New Hampshire Public Radio, and she's also a graduate of the Leadership Seacoast class of 2019. Sarah is a graduate of UNH and has a master's degree in public policy from the Carsey School of Public Policy. And outside the office, Sarah hosts Creative Guts, which if you tuned in yesterday for Laura Harper Lake's presentation, you will have already heard about Sarah. So with that, Sarah, take it away.
Thanks so much, Will, for the great introduction. I am honored to be here today to talk about my favorite topic, which is making change in local and state government in New Hampshire. But first, to introduce our featured speaker, Caroline Dillon. Caroline is the inaugural winner of Stay, Work, Play's High School Student of the Year Award. She was an excellent student with a long list of achievements and a resume that includes every extracurricular that there is. But at 17 years old, Caroline did something really spectacular that most adults don't even know they can do. She changed the law. So I'll let Caroline tell you the story about how she, at 17 years old, championed a bill that would ensure no young girls would miss school because they can't afford feminine hygiene products. A bill that Sununu signed into law last spring. Caroline is a bona fide lawmaker, and more importantly, she's an inspiration to other young people across the state. And living proof that young people in New Hampshire can make a difference. In addition to being recognized as High School Student of the Year at last year's Rising Star Awards, Senator Maggie Hassan also recognized Caroline as Granite Stater of the Month in July 2019 for demonstrating the power of compassion and advocacy in our democracy. Caroline is a New Hampshire native, and while she's attending school at the University of Pennsylvania, sort of remotely during the pandemic, we hope that she boomerangs back to the Granite State. So without further ado, I am pumped to introduce you to Caroline Dillon.
One moment. Sorry, everybody, technical difficulties. I don't know why this isn't working. Oh, here we go.
Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Dillon and I'm really excited to be presenting to you today. I know the current situation is not ideal, but I think this time spent at home could possibly provide an excellent opportunity for us all to sit down and really think about what's important to us and what changes we would like to see in our state. As you heard in Sarah's introduction, I worked with New Hampshire Senator Martha Hennessy last year to pass what was formerly known as SB 142 into law. Making a law sounds kind of big and scary and impossible, or at least that's what I first thought. I was 17, not even old enough to vote, so how could I possibly make a difference? I won't lie and tell you it was easy, because in all honesty, it was a long process that took a lot of hard work, research, and dedication. It required going so far out of my comfort zone that I couldn't go back if I tried. But despite that, a lot of really amazing things came out of this journey, and I hope to break down my experience for you so that perhaps you can do the same thing with the issues that you are passionate about. So at this point, you're all aware that my course of action involved the legislative process. Not all ideas and changes have to go through that route, but mine did, so that's what I'm going to explain. In my junior year US history class, my teacher gave us an assignment to pick a group of people who had historically been oppressed in America, such as Native Americans, African Americans, and women, and make a presentation arguing whether or not that group had achieved equality in our country today. At that particular point in time, I knew I wanted to focus my future nursing practice on women's health, so I made the obvious choice. During my aimless Googling at 11 p.m. one night, I came across the term period poverty. I could go on about how I stayed up all night researching and how that sparked my desire to make a change, but I'll make a long story short and summarize it with a line from one of my testimonies. Suddenly, the statistics weren't just numbers or nameless faces. They were my classmates, coworkers, customers, everybody. So, okay, I'd found an issue that I was passionate about, but how does that translate into a law? Now, I'm going to skip ahead to the legislative part of the story, but keep in mind that I'm glossing over a lot of the in-between details here. I had an idea, drafted a mock bill, which you can find worksheets for online or ask literally any civics teacher ever, and now I needed to find a legislator who would listen to me. Selecting a legislator is not an easy task, to be honest with you. I chose to contact a senator because there are far fewer people in the Senate than there are in the House of Representatives, so I figured it would be less searching. And it was, but the process still took me almost 2 hours. I am not a constituent of Senator Hennessy's district. The senator from my district is a very nice man, but I wasn't sure that he was the right person to sponsor a bill that was all about tampons and menstruation. So I looked through the list of senators, and then I took it further by looking at what committees they sat on, what their specific legislative interests were, and what bills they'd sponsored in the past. This information is all readily available to the public on gencourt.state.nh.us. I reached out to Senator Hennessy via email, knowing that it would probably be a while before she'd be able to get back to me. When she did, we set up a meeting in Hanover to discuss the issue at hand. She brought along 2 representatives, both from Hanover as well. At this point, I would like to take a moment to point out how awesome that was. I don't think there's many states where you can just go have coffee with your state legislators and make a plan like we did. I brought my mock bill, and we discussed how we could bring it to life. Over the next several weeks, our bill was drafted in the State House. There are people whose job it is to take these ideas from senators and representatives, research all relevant current and past laws, and then draft a bill in all the correct legal terms. Since Senator Hennessy was the primary sponsor of the bill, its journey began in the Senate. However, before bills go to the full Senate or the full House, they go to a committee. This is another great thing about New Hampshire. All bills are given a public hearing in a committee. This means that I was able to go to the State House, listen to Senator Hennessy introduce the bill, and then I had a turn to speak before the Senate committee and testify. This was terrifying. I am very much an introvert and fear public speaking more than almost anything else. Even worse than that, though, was that the public speaking was about periods and tampons, and I was saying these things out loud to some of the most important people in the state. To my great surprise, my testimony was very well received, as were those of the many other people who came forward in support of the bill. Senator Hennessy had called in help from friends at Planned Parenthood, the New Hampshire Women's Foundation, and the ACLU. Our arguments were so well received, in fact, that the committee unanimously agreed to send the bill to the full Senate. Again, not going too far into details here with the trials and tribulations of the full Senate meeting, but the important thing to know about it is that citizens cannot speak at these hearings. I disliked that immensely because I felt like this bill was my baby, and I desperately needed to defend it against the many arguments that the non-committee members threw at it, but all I could do was listen to the live stream. As you can probably assume, it passed the Senate. After the same process of testifying at the committee hearing and listening to the live stream happened when it moved to the House. Once we succeeded in the House, the bill was drafted up nicely and then sent to the governor. This process took a few weeks though, so Senator Hennessy and I took advantage of that time and made an appointment with Governor Sununu in his office at the State House to chat with him about the issue and attempt to persuade him to sign it. Specifically, we wanted to do this because the period poverty bill had become a heated argument between the two parties when really I thought that it would and should be a bipartisan issue. Unfortunately, the polarization of the State House caused the voting to go down party lines in most cases. However, this didn't seem to matter to Governor Sununu because he was thrilled with the idea of the bill and was eager to have it reach his desk, comparing it to food insecurity issues. Again, I'm going to hype up the New Hampshire government because where else could you possibly schedule an in-person meeting with the governor? We're so incredibly fortunate in this state to have such easy access to our government, and yet most of us don't even realize it. In the end, we know the bill was signed into law, otherwise I probably wouldn't be here talking to you today. All in all, from the time I first met with Senator Hennessy to the time Governor Sununu signed the bill, it took about 8 months. But now I'm going to shift gears a little and focus on how this can apply to you and your ideas. First, you have to identify an issue that you're passionate about. For me, it was period poverty. That's the very beginning, but then it's helpful to skip ahead to what you envision the end result being. In my case, my original bill stated that menstrual hygiene products would be available in all restrooms, in all public buildings, schools, and workplaces. Once you have your end goal in sight, you need to research the reasons to back it up. You can't just present an idea to someone without being able to explain why it's important or why they should care. Next, you'll want to find your audience. That may be a school board, your city council, state legislators, or someone else. Talk to them, educate them, and recruit others to join you in the fight. Nobody can win these battles alone. Having as much support as you can is greatly helpful. And once you have the ear of your audience, be prepared to go wherever that journey may take you. That might include going out of your comfort zone, talking to strangers, speaking in public, or many other things. I struggled a lot with this myself because I get embarrassed extremely easily and have this awesome tendency to blush uncontrollably in any and all situations, which people love to point out. To combat this, I reminded myself that I wasn't going to be talking about me. I was talking about the issue. I knew about the issue, and I was fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. There was no reason for me to be embarrassed because it wasn't about me. It's also important to be flexible throughout this whole process. I told you what my initial end goal was, all public bathrooms having products, and you know what the reality turned out to be. However, just because the reality doesn't end up looking like the dream does not mean that it was a failure. Progress is progress, and you cannot let yourself forget that when things don't work perfectly as planned. I also wanted to talk about media coverage and opposition. Throughout my journey, there was a lot of media involved. It ranged from local newspapers to NHPR to national news sources. As I've said, I'm a shy person, so all this media coverage and my face being plastered on the front page of the local paper was quite a shock. Suddenly, random customers at the grocery store recognized me, and my AP biology teacher came into class one morning telling me he heard my voice on the radio on the way to school. That was an adjustment, but it was all very positive. The articles written were lovely, and the School of Nursing at UPenn even wanted me to be in their biannual magazine. However, despite all of the incredibly kind and supportive people, there was a significant amount of media backlash, and a lot of it was directed at me specifically. There were some nasty comments. I was called rude names. People claimed I had ulterior motives and that I was just a stupid child with no understanding of how the real world works. I didn't let these comments upset me, however, because the people writing them don't actually know me. And if a keyboard warrior wants to call a 17-year-old girl a communist, then I'm not really going to argue. In fact, my family and I made it a regular nightly occurrence to hop on Facebook and read the mean comments out loud to each other, laughing the whole time. I will say that reading the comments is not always a good idea, but if you find yourself in this situation, please remember not to take it personally. They are strangers. They don't know you. They do not determine your worth or the value of your efforts. If you wouldn't ask them for advice, and you wouldn't because you don't know them, then don't accept their criticism, especially when said critics are not doing anything about the issue themselves. They could go to a public hearing and argue against you, but they don't care that much. They just want to be mean to strangers online. It's important to note, though, that sometimes criticism can be useful when it's not the idiotic kind. Some people pointed out that they were worried about how my bill would impact their taxes or how school districts would be able to pay for this, or if we were trying to pass an unfunded mandate. These were valid concerns and common points of opposition in the legislature, so I used them to my advantage and destroyed any possible complaints in my testimonies before the committee members could bring it up. And we all know how that turned out. In reflecting on all of this, the thing that surprised me the most was how accessible change-making is. I'm not saying it's easy, because it's not, but we've had such a unique and wonderful state government that many people don't use to their advantage. I had no idea that I could email senators or speak at public hearings or have a private meeting with the governor, but I did all those things and it was awesome. If I had to do it again, there's not much that I would change about the experience. Skipping school and testifying to make sure that other students wouldn't have to miss school was worth it. Overcoming my fear of public speaking was worth it. I only wish I'd realized sooner the power that one person can have in sparking a change.
Carolyn, that was awesome. Thank you so much. As Beth pointed out in the comments, we do have a little bit of time built in for Q&A before we jump into the next section, where we're actually going to be talking about kind of creating change on our on the local level too. So I'm curious to know, maybe as we'll see if anybody jumps in with any other questions, but as we're looking to kind of go into our next section, what advice would you give based on your experience? What advice would you have for anybody else who's had an idea of something they would like to change? Given what you learned through all of this and the lessons learned, what would you have done differently? What advice would you give?
I think, to be very specific, I would have tried to get bipartisan support from the beginning, because it did end up being so polarized unexpectedly. So I think in the long run, having bipartisan support would have been helpful, but the Democrats were in majority at the time, so that kind of worked in our favor. But generally, I think reaching out to more people and not being so nervous about the process itself would have helped me. Like I remember being terrified the whole time, every time I had to go testify. Like it was really, really scary and really intimidating. But I had some really supportive people, and as soon as I met those people, I felt like it was a lot easier.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we often tend to imagine the worst, and every time that we come up with something new, and we can imagine all the things that'll go wrong. And it's not to say that it never happens, but it rarely does. And I think it's living proof. And I'll say too, just from my own personal experience, I've testified, at the legislature, in numerous committees in both houses. And for what it's worth, I still get nervous. My heart still beats a little bit faster when they call my name, Will Stewart from Stay Work Play, and I have to get up there and give my 2 minutes. So yeah, no, kudos to you.
Thanks.
Here's a question we've had come in from Nisa Marks. She says, what did you learn about the process of building a coalition, both inside and outside the State House?
That is a good question. I think overall it really takes a village, but also even if it's kind of a weird, not weird, but like periods are not something that everyone wants to talk about, even if you think that it won't be well received, reach out anyways, because people are really excited to help you. I spoke before my school board before going to the state house, and I was again nervous because school board, whatever, but right off the bat, the superintendent, assistant superintendent were like, yeah, we can do this. We can put tampons in the schools here. Like, you just got to reach out, and it's, people will follow if your idea is, you know, a good one, an attainable one, if it's something that people are interested in, and people will be interested whether or not you think that. So it's just really important to reach out to as many people as you can and get that support, and it's a lot easier than you think it will be.
So let's see, have another question coming in from Laura Harper Lake. She asks, how aware were your peers in school about what you were doing during the 8-month process? Were they supportive and vocal?
Well, firstly, thank you, Laura, for helping me with the presentation. Big shout out, because I did not know how to use Prezi beforehand. So this is all a result of Laura. But to your question, my close friends were really aware of what I was doing. I would write out my testimonies ahead of time and read them for my friends and kind of like practice so they could give me tips and stuff. But once things started hitting the paper and like NHPR, kind of everybody knew, and they would be like walking up to me in the hallway or like sending me messages on Instagram or like finding other people who had my number to text me. And it was really weird because I was not like an exceptionally popular person in high school. So for all this attention from my peers was, it was really cool, and everyone was really supportive, and really wanted to help me out in any capacity that they could.
That's awesome. Have a more of a comment here from actually a state legislator, Representative Cole Riel from Goffstown, says, fantastic job. Great job, Caroline. Fantastic job navigating the process and educating legislators and the public alike on such an important issue.
Thank you.
Well, I believe that's about all of the questions that we've had come in. I know we have we're about halfway through our event today, and definitely want to have adequate time for the next portion, where we're going to kind of take what we learned from Carolyn today and get some guidance again from Sarah Reitzman, who's going to walk us through kind of our next activity. And Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Will. Well, I'm super pleased to say I really have nothing to teach you that Carolyn didn't already say, which is awesome. So our goal for today was to get you all inspired and then give you some steps specifically to make change in your communities at the local or state level. So as Will told you, I am the Executive Director of the Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast. We're a grassroots nonprofit whose mission is to promote housing affordability, availability, and diversity through advocacy, community engagement, and education. So I'm going to share with you our formula for advocacy, what we do on the local level in our communities, but keeping in mind that the skills of advocacy are transferable to any topic. So while housing is mine and housing and menstrual products have very little in common, aside from people needing them, that the steps of advocacy are actually incredibly similar between these two issues. So I'm going to go through what we do at the local level. You'll have a worksheet that you can use today during the breakout sessions and that you can take home with you. Yeah, so apply these concepts to what we're going to say today to whatever issue it is that you're passionate about, whether that's housing or, feminine hygiene products or something completely different. So let's start with what you need to know about your issue. So keeping in mind that you don't need to be an expert to be an advocate, it's useful to collect some information on your topic. And Carolyn pointed this out in her presentation too. It's good to have some basis and some foundational information for your argument. Don't feel like you can't start advocating until you're an expert. Just get some baseline baseline information, some baseline data. Maybe consider what's the history of your issue, particularly if you're working at the local level. Is it a controversial topic that local leaders have been debating for years? Or maybe it's a topic that's not on their radar at all. In the case of housing, it's nearly always the former. It's a controversial topic that they've been debating about for years. So any data that you need in order to make a case for your issue, or more importantly, are there personal stories that you can collect? Personal stories are a lot more compelling than data is in terms of making a compelling case for your issue. So how is your issue affecting residents or local businesses? And again, I can't stress this enough. You don't have to be an expert to be an advocate. So don't feel like you have to wait until you're ready. You're ready right now because you already have a personal story about your issue. That's why you're so passionate about it in the first place. So the next is considering who you can connect with. It's not possible to connect with too many people. The more people you can connect with and talk to, the better off you are. So Caroline talked about finding your allies, find your friends, the people who will support you. There's strength in numbers, so definitely do that. Find people who agree with you, find people who will partner with you on this work, whether it's a legislator like Senator Hennessy, or whether it's, you know, your friends or a business group in town, or depends on what your issue is, who those people are. So this is grassroots coalition building. This is what the Workforce Housing Coalition does in every one of our communities. So take the time then to identify decision makers and start to build relationship with them. Carolyn talked about getting coffee with your legislator. You can totally do that at the local level too. If your issue is state level, then find your state reps. They're all willing to, you know, email with you or talk to you on the phone or have a Zoom meeting with you or meet you for a cup of coffee, you know, when the pandemic is over. You want them to own the issue. So if they're your decision makers, it's going to be a lot easier if they really understand this issue and make it their issue too. But you also want them to see you as a resource. So relationships really are everything in this. It's also helpful to understand what your opponents might say so that you can address those up front, or at least be prepared to address them when they come up. Your best bet in that case may be to connect with the experts. For those of you who don't know, NIMBYs, not in my backyard, those are my opponents in the Workforce Housing Coalition and the work that I do on housing. And I sometimes take the time to connect with them specifically. They really want to be heard. So NIMBYs really do, your opponents really do want their opinions to be heard, and sometimes that's enough. They want to feel like they can influence the decisions, and sometimes there's opportunity for compromise too. But there's also experts that you can connect with. So whatever your issue is, think about the nonprofits or other organizations or local groups that are working on that issue and figure out how to get involved with them. They'll definitely know what the opposition is saying and sort of give you the what you need to know about the topic. Before you dive in, it's very helpful to understand the decision-making process. So is your issue likely to get resolved at the state or local level? So Carolyn took a state route in getting this passed statewide. In my case, I do the majority of my work at the local level, where I'm really looking at zoning. So Carolyn offered some awesome perspective on how to change policy at the state level, but if your issue is at the local level, the first step might be to figure out what type of government you're working with. When you get into the breakout session and you see the worksheet, you'll have access to an infographic with New Hampshire's 4 types of local government. We'll be able to figure out who your decision makers are from there. It may also be helpful to get an idea of what resources are available to your community. For example, with housing, the Municipal Technical Assistance Grant Program offers grant dollars to communities to hire a consultant specifically to explore expanding housing options. So you don't have to lead with solutions, and Carolyn talked really articulately about how her solution that she entered with ended up changing and getting changed in the process. You don't have to lead with the solutions, but if you lead with resources and ideas and encouragement for your decision makers, you might get them to own it and reach a solution that's a shared vision, something that's collaborative. My final piece of advice is to start by asking a lot of questions and really listening to the answers. So as you build relationships and connect with people, you'll collaboratively come to solutions together, and you'll be a lot more successful in the long run. So in my work, I do a lot of one-on-one conversations, or buying coffee with people, or giving presentations to small local community groups and other stakeholder groups. So I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah Davis, and she is going to divide us into breakout groups so we can start crafting our strategies together using the steps that I outlined and what Caroline outlined and what you'll see on your worksheet.
There we go. Thank you so much. So we are going to divide you guys up into breakout rooms, and Beth is going to be sending, oops, she just sent it in the chat, a link to a Google Drive folder where you will see a bunch of different documents with different room numbers. So once I assign you to a room, I'm just going to ask that you go into that sheet, and you and your team can kind of work through the steps on there. A lot of them are what Sarah went through, and there's a couple more steps in there as well as the resources that she talked about. If the link does not work, can somebody tell me? If you're in it now, it should work for everyone. You should be able to view and edit it.
I got a "you need access" notice.
Interesting. Let me double check. Let's see. Anyone with the link? Okay. Can we try it now? I think it should be.
It worked.
Perfect. So once I assign you to the rooms, you guys can go into that and start working from there. You'll have about 35 minutes. If you guys need any help in your groups, there is an option to ask for help, and it'll let me know that you guys need me to come in there, and I'll come in and help you out. But it's gonna break you up into 3 rooms. There'll be about 5 to 6 people in each of your rooms. So here we go.
Absolutely, and what a fantastic session today. Carolyn's story was certainly impressive, as were the discussions we all had afterwards on how to make change a reality in our own communities. So I hope today has helped to inspire you to create change where you live, and hopefully given you some of the practical knowledge that you can use to work with others to make a difference on issues that matter to young people here in New Hampshire. On behalf of us all, I'd like to thank Carolyn for sharing her story, and Sarah for her expert teaching and guidance today. Also, just wanted to give everyone another quick reminder that the 2020 Rising Stars Awards are now open, the nominations. We want you to help us to recognize remarkable individuals under the age of 40 here in New Hampshire for their contributions to local communities and or the Granite State as a whole. As you might know, we're using a new kind of nomination process. Hope it's a little easier, a little bit more streamlined this year. It's a 2-part process, and so the deadline for step 1 to nominate somebody, again, super easy, super quick, but has to be done by Friday, May 29th, so less than a month from today. So you can learn more at stayworkplay.org/Rising Stars Awards. Looking ahead, just wanted to give another quick reminder that we're going to be wrapping up New Hampshire Next tomorrow at 5 o'clock, so different time, 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, Friday, for New Hampshire Next After Hours. It's kind of a fun, relaxed, virtual happy hour made possible by Anheuser-Busch's Beer Garden in Merrimack. It's going to be a great opportunity just to hang out, get to know some of your fellow attendees, and again, a more relaxed, laid-back setting. Bring your drink of choice, and have a chat with other young people who also want to affect change here in New Hampshire. So with that, I'd like to say thank you again to Dartmouth Hitchcock Health for their sponsorship of today's event. And also for the entire week. And again, thank you all for taking part today, and hope to see you tomorrow, 5 o'clock, right back here. And with that, have a great day. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Stay Work Play.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
Caroline.
I thought Chris might have come in there with some exit music. I was gonna say something, but then he had already left. I was like, darn! Beth, you're muted. If you were trying to say something, I couldn't
You're
tell.
recording.
Oh, yeah, but I can cut it.